Okay, now since there's a big conference talk across college, we are gonna focus on Notre Dame. As you know, they do not belong to the ACC in football. They do belong into the ACC in just about every other sport, but football. As last year when the COVID thing happened, they joined the ACC in order to compete. They would not have a chance at the shot of the playoffs if they did not. They joined the conference. They upset number one Clemson and lost to them in a rematch in the ACC title game. So Notre Dame has gone still the entire program without winning a single conference title, and I don't think they ever will because they're going to go right back to not being in a conference. Since all this talk about teams moving conferences, it is interesting to see how Notre Dame will react to this. It is interesting to see if Notre Dame will join a conference. If they do, it's most likely going to be the ACC, since they do belong to the ACC in every other sport. Basketball, they belong to the ACC. Football, they don't. They have never, and I don't think they ever will, unless this whole conference talk does convince them to join the ACC. The ACC allows Notre Dame to play as many ACC teams as they like. They open up this season with Florida State at Tallahassee. Um, that game generally in the past has been one of the games of the years when Florida State was competitive. It is a historical sort of right. I wouldn't say it's a rivalry, but it's a game that when those two teams are normally in the top 10 or 5, if you had nothing else to watch, you were turning on that game or you were keeping tabs on it. Notre Dame has they play these teams in the ACC and how many they ever like because the ACC allows them to. Notre Dame has a history with Boston College. Notre Dame hasn't really played Clemson that much, but they play as many ACC teams as they like. They have a history with Virginia Tech. The ACC, with this upcoming conference talk that's happening about Oklahoma and Texas moving to the SEC, and then all these Big 12 schools calling the Big 10 and Pac 12, and Pac 12 schools wanting to move to the Big 10, Notre Dame should be starting to look into joining the ACC. The ACC also, with this, should tell Notre Dame to either join the conference or not allow them to play any teams from their conference. Because not the ACC is just letting Notre Dame run all over them. Play all your teams, and we don't have to join your conference. Like Notre Dame gets to get to the playoff without winning a conference title game. That's ridiculous. But because every time they get in the playoffs, they get destroyed. 2014, they got in the BCS title game, or was it 2012? No, okay, I don't know. But they got in the BCS title game and they got blown out by Alabama. Then they went to the playoff, got blown out by Clemson. And they went to the playoff again recently, got blown out by Alabama. They do not fare well in major postseason games. So Alabama is not Alabama. Notre Dame needs to look into joining a conference with all this talk coming on because I don't know how they're going to end up doing if this whole conference talk, like mega conferences and super conferences, if that ends up happening, Notre Dame probably won't survive. It depends because all these major teams are going to be in these conferences. Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Georgia are going to be in the SEC. You have Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana. They're not big teams. Then you have Ohio State up in and maybe Oregon and USC up in the Big Ten, and you have Clemson in Florida State in the ACC. Notre Dame just needs to be looking into joining a conference, and much like other independent teams like BYU, Army, New Mexico State, they should look into joining conferences if they want to have a chance at competing. BYU needs to look into joining if they want a chance to be like much other teams because last season they were looking to play any team, anytime, anywhere. They played Coastal Carolina. We saw how that went. Army, Army's Army. We don't talk about Army here. We don't bad talk Army on this channel. But Notre Dame, they should look into joining the ACC or any other conference. If they do join a conference, I think it'll be the ACC, considering, like I said, they are a part of the ACC in every other sport. But that's just my opinion. Nobody asked for it, but I just think that Notre Dame needs to join a conference. They need to stop being independent. It's not helping anybody. For an example, Florida State was independent for the longest time. Then they joined the ACC and they dominated. They took over the ACC once they joined them. They ruled it with an iron fist. Florida State made the jump from being independent to joining the Atlantic Coast. Notre Dame should be looking into doing the same thing. Who knows? Maybe Notre Dame might rule the ACC. They might take Clemson's spot and take over the conference if they join. Or they might be a bottom feeder since joining a conference. It does, who knows? But if they want to get some respect from college football and the playoff committee, they should join a conference. Because a conference title on your resume, if you're undefeated, will look a lot better if you're just undefeated and don't have a conference title. It'll look a lot better to the playoff committee and on your resume if you have a title than if you're just independent and you don't have one. That's more games, more wins, and a better win on your resume. Any postseason game like a conference title, no matter what conference it is, it looks good to you because you're playing the best or the second best in your conference. Like Notre Dame and Clemson played each other in the ACC title game, even though Clemson kind of got blown out. They did upset Clemson in the regular season. You might argue that's because Trevor Lawrence couldn't play, but they still beat them. Notre Dame should look into joining the ACC, and this is my opinion. I mean, a lot of people could back me up. I don't know. But this is my opinion, but no one asked for it. Anyway, this is my opinion. So, here it is. And that's it for this video. I'm just saying Notre Dame should look into joining the ACC sometime soon with all this talk about conferences. And I will see y'all in the next video.